Sometimes the biggest discoveries happen completely by accident. And that's exactly what happened here. A simple observation about, of all things, drooling dogs. Well, it ended up unlocking a fundamental secret about how our minds work. This is a wild story of chance, super strict science, and a discovery that, believe it or not, still shapes our world every single day.
So, let's start with a puzzle. Why would a dog drool at the sound of a footstep? I mean, food. Okay, that makes total sense. But just footsteps? It seems weird, right? Well, that little mystery is what kicked off an entire field of psychology, and it's the puzzle we're going to solve right now.
And here's the kicker. The guy at the center of this whole thing, Ivan Pavlov, he wasn't even a psychologist. Not at all. He was a physiologist. His famous breakthrough, the one that rewired how we think about the mind, yeah, it was a complete and total accident.
To give you an idea of how much of an accident it was, get this. In 1904, Pavlov won the Nobel Prize. Awesome, right? But it had nothing to do with psychology. Zero. His big award was for his main research, which was all about how doggy digestive systems work. The brain stuff? That was just a weird little distraction. At least, at first.
So picture this. Pavlov is doing his digestion experiments, and he starts noticing something odd. The dogs would start salivating before the food even showed up. They drool just at the sight of the lab assistant, or even just hearing the guy's footsteps coming down the hall. Pavlov had no idea what to make of it. He didn't have a scientific term for it yet, so he came up with this pretty cool phrase, psychic secretions.
Now, this little mystery was way too interesting for a scientist like Pavlov to just ignore. So he put his digestion research on the back burner and shifted his entire focus to this strange phenomenon. He designed one of the most famous experiments in history to figure out what was really going on.
Okay, so first, he established the baseline. You show a dog some food. That's the unconditioned stimulus. And naturally it drools. That's the unconditioned response. No learning involved, it just happens. Then you ring a bell, a totally neutral stimulus. And just as you'd expect, nothing happens. The dog doesn't care. Right, now for the magic. This is the learning phase. Pavlov would ring the bell just a moment before he brought out the food. And he did this over and over and over again. Bell, then food. Bell, then food. Inside the dog's brain, a brand new, powerful connection was being built.
And this is the breakthrough moment. After doing this enough times, Pavlov would ring the bell, but this time with no food. And guess what? The dog drooled anyway. That bell, which started out as totally meaningless, had become a conditioned stimulus. It was now powerful enough to trigger the salivation all by itself. A brand new, learned, conditioned response. So cool.
You have to understand, Pavlov was a seriously meticulous scientist. He wanted to be absolutely sure that no other sounds or sights were messing with his results. So he built this special soundproof laboratory he called the Tower of Silence. This let him isolate the bell as the one and only stimulus, making his results scientifically rock solid.
Okay, so Pavlov proved that it works, but let's talk about how it works. We're going to quickly unpack the official terms that scientists now use to describe this powerful type of learning, which we now call classical conditioning. First up is the unconditioned stimulus, or UCS for short. Just think of this as the natural cause and effect thing. In the experiment, it's the food. It automatically, instinctively makes the dog drool. No learning needed.
And then we have the conditioned stimulus, or CS. This is the thing that starts out as totally neutral. Remember, the bell meant nothing to the dog at first, but by pairing it with the food again and again, it starts to soak up the power of the food, eventually learning to trigger that exact same response.
Of course, once you make that new connection, the story isn't quite over. This whole learned association thing is actually pretty dynamic. And Pavlov's work uncovered a few other key ideas that add a little more depth to the whole picture.
For example, the dog might start drooling if it hears a bell with a slightly different pitch. That's called generalization. But if you keep training it, the dog can learn to respond only to that one specific original bell and ignore all the others. And that's called discrimination.
So what happens if you just keep ringing the bell but you never bring the food again? Well, eventually the drooling response will fade away. That process is called extinction. But here's the twist. After a break, if you ring the bell again out of the blue, the dog might start salivating again. That's called spontaneous recovery. It shows the brain doesn't really forget completely.
Look,
This might all seem like it's just about dogs and bells in a lab 100 years ago, but the impact of these experiments is, well, it's absolutely massive. So let's connect the dots from Pavlov's lab straight to your own life.
In the world of psychology, these principles are the bedrock for some really powerful therapies. There's a method called systematic desensitization, which is used to treat phobias and anxiety. It works by slowly pairing the thing you're afraid of with a state of deep relaxation, basically unconditioning that fear response. It's life-changing stuff.
And you really do see it everywhere. Every time you use a clicker to train your dog or cat, you're using classical conditioning. You're pairing that neutral click sound with a treat. But you know who the biggest user of this science is? The world of modern advertising. Just think about it for a second. An ad shows a cool new car, that's the neutral stimulus, right alongside images of adventure, freedom, attractive people, all the stuff that makes us feel good. That's the unconditioned stimulus. The goal is for your brain to link that positive feeling directly with the car. It's literally Pavlov's experiment, just on a global scale. So here's the big takeaway. The crucial point is this. Pavlov's accidental discovery proved that our behaviors, our fears, even our desires aren't just hardwired into us from birth. They can be learned. They can be shaped, and they can even be unlearned, all through the simple but powerful process of association. It was a complete revolution in how we understand ourselves. Which brings us to one last thought. That TV jingle that suddenly makes you hungry for a snack? That specific smell that instantly brings back a powerful memory? Or the notification sound on your phone that gives you that little jolt of anticipation? Now that you know the secret, what invisible strings of conditioning are pulling you every single day?